Rain fell softly over the quiet cemetery as twilight draped the sky in shades of deep blue and violet. The woman stood alone, her fingers trembling as they traced the engraved name on the marble tombstone. Jonathan Miller. Beloved husband. Lost too soon. A bouquet of white lilies, already damp from the drizzle, lay at the foot of the grave. Her eyes were swollen but dry, as if she had cried every tear her body could produce. She knelt, her coat soaking at the knees, and whispered words too quiet for even the wind to hear. Her voice cracked as she spoke his name, as if by saying it again, she could bring him back. The pain had not dulled with time. It had only settled deeper, becoming part of her like bone or blood. Then a voice behind her said the impossible. He wanted you to know, even in the end, he never stopped loving you. She turned, startled. A man stood at the edge of the path. He was tall, in a black coat that shimmered faintly with rain. His eyes were soft, almost mournful, and held a weight that made her chest tighten. He looked vaguely familiar, like someone she'd seen in passing. But his words, those exact words, were the last Jonathan had ever spoken. Her breath caught in her throat. What did you say? The man stepped closer, carefully. He said it just before he passed. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I never stopped loving her. The world swayed. She gripped the tombstone for support. Her heart raced and 1,000 questions burst into her mind. Who was this man? How did he know Jonathan's final words? Only the hospital staff had been present. She had arrived too late to say goodbye. They had told her he passed peacefully, with no last message. And yet here was this stranger, speaking with a certainty that pierced her like a blade. She studied him, her gaze moving over the faint scar on his temple, the damp curls at his forehead, the way he held himself like a man who had seen too much. Were you there? At the hospital? He nodded, slowly. Yes. But that wasn't the first time I met Jonathan. The wind shifted. Leaves rustled like whispers from the past. She rose slowly, her legs stiff. Then who are you? The man looked at her for a long moment, then offered a sad smile. That story starts many years before he met you. And it doesn't end where you think it does. She frowned, confusion etched across her features. Why are you telling me this now? Because, he said, reaching into his coat and pulling out a worn envelope, you deserve the truth. And he wanted me to be the one to give it to you. Her fingers brushed against the envelope as she took it, the paper soft from years of handling. Her name was written on it in Jonathan's handwriting. But the date on the corner, it was dated 7 years before they had even met. The man turned, ready to leave. Open it when you're ready. But once you do, nothing will ever be the same. She stood frozen, the envelope heavy in her hands, the rain now forgotten. As he walked away, disappearing into the misty path lined with gravestones, she whispered to herself, "What did you hide from me, Jonathan?" And from that question, the past began to unravel like a thread pulled from the hem of a life she thought she understood. She hadn't returned to this side of town in years. The street still echoed with memories, some fleeting, some too heavy to carry. Anna stepped off the bus, gripping her tote bag tighter, her shoes hitting the sidewalk like hesitant heartbeats. She didn't know what she was looking for. Closure, perhaps. Or a glimpse of a face that haunted her dreams but never showed itself clearly. The wind brushed her cheeks, reminding her of that November night long ago. A night when a stranger stepped out from behind the rain. 6 years earlier, Anna was a receptionist at St. Helens Clinic, barely making ends meet. She spent her days juggling patient files, answering calls, and trying not to let anyone notice the trembling in her voice when the landlord's messages piled up. That day had been especially rough. A woman collapsed in the waiting room. The doctor had yelled at her. Her paycheck had been late. And it was raining when she left, hard. The downpour had turned the sidewalk into a blur of umbrellas and headlights. She ducked into a bus shelter, soaked to the bone, hugging herself for warmth. And that's when she heard it, a voice, low and warm. "You dropped this." He handed her a scarf. Not hers. But soft. Dry. Smelling faintly of cedarwood and something else she couldn't name. She looked up, and for a brief moment, the world paused. He wasn't conventionally handsome, not in the way magazines suggested, but there was something about him. The tired kindness in his eyes. The slight tremble in his fingers, as if he, too, was carrying something too fragile to say aloud. "Keep it," he said, shrugging when she tried to return it. "Looks like you need it more than I do." "Thank you," she managed. "Are you waiting for the bus too?" "No," he smiled. "Just walking. Sometimes it helps." She nodded, unsure what else to say. They stood in silence for a minute, the rain beating down like drum rolls on glass. Then she spoke again, surprised by her own voice. "Sometimes I pretend the rain is just the world crying for me." He looked at her then, more deeply than anyone had in a long time. "Maybe it's crying with you. Not for." And she laughed. Softly. A sound that felt like sunlight in her throat. They didn't exchange names. Didn't need to. But when he turned to leave, he looked back. The world forgets a lot of things. But not kindness. Or pain. That night, she had dried the scarf and tucked it into her drawer. She thought of him often. Not obsessively. But like a song you don't remember liking until it plays again. Now, years later, as she passed the entrance of the clinic, closed now, boarded up, she felt something shift inside her. Her feet carried her forward before her mind caught up. She walked 2 blocks more and stopped in front of a bookstore. Its windows glowed with warm yellow light. A chalkboard sign outside read, "Used books and new chances." She almost turned away. Almost. But then a gust of wind blew her tote bag open, and the scarf, his scarf, fluttered out, landing softly on the steps. "Looks like you dropped something," a voice said, too familiar. Her breath caught. Slowly, she turned. There he was. Older, yes. A little more gray at the temples. But the same eyes. The same gentleness. And in his hand, the scarf. "I think it's yours," he added. And then, more softly, "though I always hoped you kept it." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. He smiled faintly. "You okay?" I didn't think I'd see you again." "Same." He hesitated. "But life's funny that way. It has a cruel sense of memory." She looked down. Then back up. "You own this place?" "Sort of. Co-own. Took it over a few years ago." After, he trailed off, the shadow of something unnamed flickering across his face. "It's quiet. Books don't scream. They just wait." They stood there for a moment, the sounds of the street hushed by something deeper. "Want to come in?" he asked. She nodded. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. The warmth of the space wrapped around her like a blanket. Wooden shelves lined with well-loved pages, a scent of old stories and brewing tea. He motioned toward a small couch by the window. "Tea?" he asked. "Sure." He disappeared behind a curtain. She sat, her hands resting on the scarf in her lap. And just as the bell above the door rang again, someone entering or leaving, she noticed a frame on the far shelf. A photograph. A woman with soft brown eyes, standing next to him. Her smile familiar. She rose slowly, drawn to it. And beneath the frame, a small plaque. Asterisk for Mia. "You never got your story, but you gave me mine, asterisk." When he returned, she didn't ask. But her voice was gentler. "She was important to you." He nodded. "She was my wife. I'm sorry." He looked at her, eyes steady. "Me too." And in the quiet that followed, he said the words she didn't expect. The words that unraveled everything she thought she knew about that night. "She's the reason I spoke to you. That night in the rain." Her final words, he swallowed. She said, "Don't forget to be kind. Even when it hurts." Anna's eyes widened. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Because in that moment, she understood. He hadn't just been a stranger. He had been someone trying to keep a promise. To someone he loved. To someone who had once loved him enough to leave him with those final words. And now, unknowingly, she had walked back into the echo of that promise. The little apartment above the flower shop barely held warmth, even with the heater turned up. Amanda sat on the edge of the narrow bed, her knees tucked to her chest, the edges of a threadbare blanket curling around her feet. On the nightstand, a chipped photo frame stood upright, her husband in uniform, smiling that same crooked smile that always made her feel safe. She traced the glass with her fingers, her breath fogging the surface. She hadn't moved it since the day she brought it home from the hospital. Even now, 3 years after losing him, the silence still roared. The kind of silence that followed you into sleep and met you first thing in the morning. Her job at the flower shop had become more than just a paycheck, it was her tether to reality. Arranging petals, trimming stems, tying ribbons, it gave her hands something to do when her heart felt too heavy to hold. Outside, the streets of Boston were wet and gray, mirroring the weight she carried. She had just returned from delivering a sympathy bouquet when Mrs. Elkins, her landlady, called her down to collect a letter. It was unusual, Amanda hadn't received mail in weeks. But what made her hands tremble wasn't the envelope. It was the handwriting. Firm, elegant, masculine, and unmistakably familiar. She opened it slowly, the way one might unwrap a relic or a wound. Inside was a note, simple and short. "Your kindness saved a man who didn't know he was drowning. Please meet me again. Wednesday. 4 p.m. The bench by the war memorial." It wasn't signed. But she knew who had written it. The man from the hospital. The one who had stared at her with too much knowing in his eyes. The one who had spoken her husband's final words like he had been there. Amanda didn't know why she had kept the little cloth handkerchief he had handed her that day. But it was still folded neatly in her coat pocket, alongside the creased hospital visitor pass and the receipt for the tea she never drank. She had replayed the encounter too many times in her mind, searching for logic. For coincidence. But everything he had said, it wasn't the kind of thing strangers say. That Wednesday arrived on a gust of cold wind. She didn't intend to go. She told herself it was foolish. Dangerous, even. But by 3:30 p.m., she found herself walking to the memorial, her boots clicking softly against the damp pavement. The city had begun to bloom into spring, but the air still bit like winter. When she reached the park, her heart stilled. He was already there. The same man. Tall. Composed. His back straight, hands folded neatly in his lap. He wore a navy trench coat this time, but the scarf was the same, the soft gray wool that matched the streaks in his hair. She almost turned back. But his eyes met hers. Not with surprise. With certainty. Like he had always known she would come. Amanda sat beside him, keeping a respectful distance. The wind tousled her hair, and she tucked it behind one ear, just to keep her fingers from shaking. He said nothing at first. Neither did she. The stone memorial in front of them bore the names of soldiers who had died serving, a long list etched into silence. "Your husband was a good man," he said finally. She stiffened. "You said that before. But I don't understand how you knew him." "I didn't," he replied gently. Not in the way you mean. Amanda turned to face him, her voice a whisper. Then how did you know what he said? His final words, those were ours. No one else knew them. He looked down at his hands. They were strong, but there was a tremble beneath the surface. Because I was there. Not physically, but, in a way I can't explain easily. I've spent my life seeing things most people don't. She blinked. Are you saying you're psychic? He shook his head. No. Nothing like that. More like, moments find me. Unfinished ones. The kind that don't let go until someone hears them. Amanda tried to scoff, but the sound died before it could leave her throat. Something about the way he spoke, so devoid of ego, so full of quiet pain, made it hard to dismiss. Her husband had always joked about fate, about second chances. He used to say if he ever got the chance to say goodbye, he'd find a way to do it right. Why me? She asked. Why now? The man turned to her then, and his eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something older. Wiser. Because your husband never stopped thinking of you. And because I couldn't ignore what I saw. Amanda swallowed hard. The breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine, her husband's favorite flower. She closed her eyes for a moment. Somewhere between belief and disbelief, something cracked open. Not her logic. Her longing. He said, the man began again, slowly this time, that he wished he could have seen you hold your son. That he hoped you'd name him after your father, not his. That your laughter was the only sound that ever made him forget the war. Amanda froze. Her lip trembled. No one else knew we talked about that. I know, he said softly. I didn't come to hurt you. I came, because he couldn't. She sat in silence, her mind reeling between grief and wonder. Could it be true? Could someone carry messages across that thin veil between life and whatever came after? Or had she simply needed this story, this man, to fill a void too vast to name? I don't know if I believe you, she said finally. He nodded. You don't have to. But I'll be here. Same time, next week. She looked at him then. Really looked. There was nothing threatening in his posture. Nothing demanding. Just presence. And something deeply, inexplicably kind. She stood up slowly, her heart heavier and lighter all at once. As she turned to go, she paused. Did he say anything else? The man looked up at her, eyes solemn. Yes. He said, he never knew heaven until he saw you in that yellow dress. Amanda gasped. And then, she walked away, because if she stayed a second longer, she might never leave. Amanda didn't tell anyone about the man. Not her sister, not the women at the flower shop, not even the pastor who had walked her through grief when her world had fallen apart. It was the kind of story that didn't hold up under daylight, the kind people would tilt their heads at and say, you just need rest. So she kept it to herself, wrapped tight around her ribs like the wool scarf she wore too late into spring. But every Wednesday, she returned to that bench. And he was always there. He never pushed. Never demanded she believe. He just listened. And in those hours, beneath the rustling trees and fading stone names, Amanda began to speak of her husband in ways she hadn't allowed herself to before. Not the heroic soldier or the tragic loss, but the man who burned toast and danced badly in their kitchen, who cried the day she miscarried and stayed up all night repotting the orchid she once called ugly. And sometimes, just sometimes, the man beside her would echo things back, words, details, phrases only her husband could have known. Tell me about the photo, he said one afternoon, as they sat watching a group of schoolchildren pass by, laughter trailing like birdsong. Amanda blinked. What photo? The one on your nightstand. Him in uniform. He's looking left, not straight ahead. Her breath caught. That exact pose, casual, one eyebrow raised. It had been taken the day before his deployment, in their garden, when he insisted the tomatoes would never grow. "I never told anyone about that picture," she whispered. "I didn't ask to know," he replied gently. "It just arrived." She didn't understand what he meant, and she didn't ask. Some things didn't want to be understood. They just wanted to be felt. But still, the rational part of her tugged at the threads. Who was this man? What did he want from her? So the next time they met, Amanda brought a question. One he wouldn't be able to fake. "Where did we meet?" she asked, keeping her voice even. He looked out toward the war memorial, where a single flag fluttered half-mast. "You were 23. He was 25. You spilled hot cider on his boots at the harvest fair, and instead of yelling, he offered you a napkin and asked if you believed in fate. You told him he was weird. And then, for some reason, you didn't leave." Amanda didn't breathe. She hadn't even remembered that herself until he said it. Not in full. But now it came rushing back, the feel of his wool coat against her bare arms, the laugh that startled her, the way he kept glancing at the horizon like he already knew something was coming. She whispered, "He said he felt like he had already met me, in a dream." The man turned to her, voice almost inaudible. "He did." That night, Amanda walked the long way home. Her legs moved automatically, but her mind floated somewhere between memory and the edge of something too big for words. What if, just what if, this man hadn't found her by accident? What if her grief had summoned him, like an unfinished chapter demanding to be read? Inside her apartment, she placed the kettle on and curled up on the couch, clutching the pillow her husband used to prop his feet on. She pulled out her old journals, dusty and half-forgotten, flipping through pages of old thoughts, torn grocery lists, and once-scrawled prayers. Tucked between 2 pages was a note. A letter her husband had written on his last night home. She'd found it months after the funeral, when her hands were too numb to cry anymore. But now, she read it again. "If I don't come back, don't look for signs. Don't wait for voices. But if somehow you feel me, really feel me, don't run from it. Let it find you." Tears blurred her vision. She didn't remember that last line. Or maybe she hadn't been ready to see it until now. The next morning, she took a cab across town. Not to the bench. Not to the flower shop. But to the hospital where it all began. She asked to speak to the front desk nurse. She described the man who had sat beside her in the waiting room 3 weeks ago. The one who had told her about her husband's final words. The nurse frowned. "I don't remember anyone matching that." "You were alone, I'm sure of it." Amanda insisted. She asked about visitor logs. Security cameras. The nurse finally brought in a supervisor, who confirmed, on that day, at that hour, there was no visitor signed in under the name Amanda Carr. No man seen sitting near her. No footage. She stood frozen in the hospital lobby, surrounded by antiseptic scent and the low hum of machines. Her hands clenched the paper coffee cup, now lukewarm and forgotten. She looked up at the ceiling, blinking hard. Was she losing her mind? Or had she finally started seeing clearly? Outside, the clouds broke slightly, letting in a sliver of gold. Amanda stepped into the light, clutching the coat tighter around her. She walked back to the war memorial. It was early. He wouldn't be there yet. But she needed to see it anyway. When she arrived, her breath caught in her throat. He was already seated. Not in the same spot. But closer to the monument this time, as if guarding something sacred. As she approached, he stood. "Why are you here?" she asked, voice brittle. "You don't exist." "I checked. They said you were never there." "I know," he replied. "Then what are you?" He didn't answer. Just looked at her with that same, terrible softness. The kind that made you ache in places you didn't have names for. "You're not real," she whispered. "You're not just some man." He said nothing. But in his silence, she felt her heart begin to split open again. And this time, she didn't try to stop it. Amanda didn't know why she sat beside him again. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe it was just that every time she tried to walk away from this mystery, something deeper inside her, something ancient and aching, pulled her back. The sky that morning was undecided, patches of gray stitched between hesitant blue. Trees whispered quietly in the breeze, as if they, too, held secrets they weren't ready to share. She lowered herself onto the stone bench slowly, as if afraid it might vanish beneath her. He was already there, gazing forward with a stillness she hadn't seen in anyone since the funeral. "I went to the hospital," she said after a long silence. "I asked about you. They said you weren't there. That no one sat with me. No cameras, no visitor logs, no memory." He didn't turn to her. "They're right." Her fingers curled around the frayed edge of her coat. "Then how do I know you're not just grief? Something my mind invented to survive?" His eyes closed for a moment, and when he opened them, there was something heavier in them. Not pain. Not guilt. Something older. Grief doesn't whisper back, Amanda. It doesn't ask you questions about yourself. It doesn't sit through the rain just to hear you talk about your mother's apple pie. She didn't laugh, but her lips twitched. "How do you even know she baked apple pie?" "You told me." "No. I didn't." Now, he turned to face her fully. "Then maybe he did." Amanda froze. "Stop. Please. I'm not here to hurt you," he said gently. She looked down at her lap. "Then why are you here?" His silence returned. Long, heavy. Weighted like a memory trapped in a box for too long. "Finally," he said, "because he asked me to be." Amanda blinked. "What?" The man reached into his coat and pulled something small from the inside pocket. A scrap of paper, folded until the edges had begun to wear thin. He held it out. Reluctantly, Amanda took it. It was her husband's handwriting. And it was a letter she had never seen before. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "If you're reading this, Amanda, then I didn't make it home. And that thought kills me in a way no battlefield ever could. But I made arrangements. For someone to find you. To sit with you. To remind you that love doesn't end in silence." Her throat closed. The paper shook. And for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. The man spoke softly. "He didn't want you to carry this alone. He believed, no, he knew, that pain needs a witness." Tears spilled before she could stop them. Not because of what the letter said, but because of the voice she heard as she read it, his voice, rising from the spaces between each word, as if he were there with her. "You're not him," she said, trying to ground herself in logic. "You don't look like him. You don't sound like him." "I'm not," the man replied. "But I knew him. And I carry something of him. You might call it memory. Or maybe just promise." Amanda clutched the letter to her chest, her body shaking from more than just cold. This can't be real." He leaned forward. "Amanda, there are things in this world that defy form. Grief. Love. Even time. You don't have to understand them to be changed by them. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Neither did he. But he did what he could. "He left you this. I don't want another goodbye." He nodded solemnly. "Then don't say it." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Amanda read the letter again, slower this time, letting every syllable settle in her chest like soft stones. When she finally looked up, the man beside her was watching a squirrel bury something beneath the roots of a tree. "Did he know he was going to die?" she asked. "I don't think he was certain. But he suspected. And you?" "I don't have the answers, Amanda. I'm just here." Like he asked me to be. She tried to process that. But you're not family. You're not a friend I ever heard of. He gave a half smile. Sometimes the most important promises are made in silence, between people no one ever expects to meet. Who are you? He stood. The sudden shift startled her, and for a moment she thought he was leaving. But instead, he reached into his coat again and pulled out something else. A dog tag. Her heart stopped. It was scratched, worn. But it was her husband's. I thought it was lost, she whispered, reaching out as if afraid it would burn her. He left it with me, the man said. Said it belonged to someone brave enough to keep living. Amanda took it, her fingers grazing the cool metal. The weight of it pulled her back into 1,000 forgotten mornings, his hand at her waist, his laugh against her ear, the way he whispered, forever, without ever saying the word. When will I see you again? She asked, barely audible. I'll be here, he said. As long as you need me. But why you? The man paused, then whispered, because I owed him. And now, I owe you. Then he walked away. Not fast. Not slow. Just enough to let her decide whether she wanted to follow. She didn't. Not yet. Instead, she sat there, the dog tag pressed against her palm, the letter in her coat, and a warmth in her chest that hadn't been there for years. She looked up to the sky, where clouds were starting to part. And whispered, I remember. I remember everything. It was never about the coffee. Or the bench. Or the grave she sat near each morning as if waiting for it to speak. It was about patterns, habits formed in grief, and the invisible threads that tied them to the places where love once lived. Amanda returned every day now, not because she expected the stranger to be there, but because part of her feared what it would mean if he wasn't. That morning, he was already seated. As if he had always been there, like part of the scenery she simply hadn't noticed before. He wasn't reading. Wasn't scrolling his phone. Just sitting, back straight, hands resting on his knees. Eyes closed. Breathing like someone who had finally stopped running. She stood at a distance, unsure whether to interrupt. Unsure if she wanted to know more. He opened his eyes without turning. You came. I didn't say I wouldn't. You didn't say you would either. I'm still figuring out which part of this is real. He nodded, understanding. Fair. Amanda sat, her movements more relaxed this time, the edge of her coat brushing his. Tell me something that is real. Something only he would know. He looked over slowly, studying her face not like a man trying to seduce or impress, but like a man memorizing a map he might one day need to find his way home. He used to rub his thumb against the side of his ring finger when he was nervous, the man said. Always clockwise. 3 circles, then a pause. He never realized he did it. Said it started when he almost dropped your wedding ring during the ceremony. Her throat tightened. He was right. And what else? She pressed, needing to test this connection further. He wasn't perfect. No, the man agreed. He was stubborn. He hated asking for help. Especially after deployments. He'd stay up late pretending to read, but really, he was waiting to see if you would come sit beside him without being asked. Amanda covered her mouth with her hand. That memory, it wasn't something she'd ever spoken aloud. The ritual of silent comfort. Her fingers brushing his shoulder until he reached for her hand. You know things, she murmured. But I still don't understand who you are. Neither do I, he said simply. I only know what I've been asked to carry. The sun crept over the cemetery wall, and the wind turned warmer. A child's laughter echoed from somewhere distant, too far to see, close enough to feel. Amanda reached into her coat and pulled out the letter. Why me? She asked. Why would he plan this? Why not just write everything down himself? The man took a breath, and for the first time, she saw the flicker of something vulnerable in his expression. Because he knew grief would lie to you, he said. That it would tell you he wasn't real. That your time together was fading. He wanted someone to remind you of the truth after the truth stopped feeling solid. She stared at him. You're not a therapist. Or a counselor. No. And you're not a soldier either. At least, not anymore. He hesitated. I was. Once. Amanda narrowed her eyes. Did you serve with him? A long silence. Then, softly, no. Then how? I knew of him, the man interrupted gently. And more importantly, I knew what he needed when he reached out. She paused. This was some kind of, what? A program? For the dying. You could call it that. Or you could call it what it truly is, unfinished business wrapped in kindness. Amanda felt the edges of her heart softening, the pieces she had tried to harden for protection beginning to melt. Why would anyone do that? For a stranger? He smiled faintly. Because once, a stranger did it for me. They fell into silence again, but it was no longer awkward. It was shared. Earned. Amanda watched the clouds shift above, then looked down at the paper in her hand. Do you know what his last words were? The man looked at her carefully. I do. Can you tell me? I can. But only if you promise to really hear them. Not just listen, but feel them. Amanda nodded slowly. The man leaned forward, and in a voice so quiet it barely touched the air, he said, Tell Amanda. I found home. Amanda blinked. Her hands tightened around the paper. That's it. That's everything, he said. You were his home. You are his home. A sob built in her throat, but she held it back. Not because she was embarrassed, but because the ache didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt honored. He always said I gave him a reason to come back, she whispered. And when he couldn't, the man replied, he found a way to send the reason forward. Amanda folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside her coat. Do you believe in fate? I don't know, he said. But I believe in choices. And I believe in carrying love forward, even when it breaks you. She looked at him again. Really looked. He had the kind of face that made you wonder what he'd survived to wear such gentleness like armor. And yet, he didn't flinch from her gaze. He offered it freely, without agenda. Do you think he forgives me? She asked. For what? For moving on. For wanting to. For not visiting every day like I used to. The man smiled, and it was the kind that reached his eyes. He never asked you to stay in the past. He asked you to remember love. And love doesn't live in graveyards. It lives in what you build after. Amanda stood, and he followed. They didn't say goodbye. There was no need. Instead, he walked beside her in silence, matching her pace. And when they reached the edge of the cemetery, she paused. I might come back tomorrow, she said. I'll be here. Even if I don't. Especially then. And then she did something neither of them expected. She reached out, and took his hand. It was warm. Grounded. Human. She didn't know what it meant yet. But maybe, just maybe, she was ready to find out. Amanda had always believed in silence. In its depth, its dignity. After the funeral, she told herself the best way to honor Michael was to not speak of him unless she had something meaningful to say. But now, walking away from the man who'd spoken her husband's last words like he carried them in his bones, she wasn't sure silence had done justice to her grief, or to the love they once had. She kept walking, down the hill, past the gates, onto the empty sidewalk where the wind no longer felt like a punishment. He didn't follow this time. He'd stayed behind in the cemetery, allowing her to choose if this would continue, or if it ended with a whisper beneath the sycamore tree. She didn't look back. That night, Amanda sat at her kitchen table, an untouched cup of tea going cold beside her elbow. Her fingers hovered over her phone screen, scrolling through the gallery of photos she hadn't dared open in months. There he was, Michael, smiling that crooked smile of his, one arm slung around her shoulder in a photo taken on a random Thursday at a food truck fair. It had rained. They were soaked. But he'd said it was the best meal of his life. Not because of the food, but because of her laughter echoing through the downpour. Amanda didn't realize she was crying until a tear hit the screen. She tapped the photo, zoomed in, and stared at Michael's hand. The same one he'd always rubbed in nervous circles. She remembered how he used to do it when telling a hard truth, or making a promise that meant everything. 3 circles. Pause. 3 more. She turned off the phone and reached for the folded letter again. But this time, she didn't read it. Instead, she flipped it over. And found a name written on the back. Liam. The stranger's name. Her breath caught. She had never asked his name, not once. But now she had it. And the familiarity of it twisted something in her chest. Because that was the name of the medic Michael had mentioned in one of his final voice messages. She hadn't saved the message, hadn't thought much of it at the time. He was rambling, tired, about a guy who'd sat beside him in the transport vehicle after a mission. If I don't make it back, he'd said, Liam says he'll finish the story. Amanda's heart thudded in her ears. She opened her laptop and began typing, military personnel database, veterans, medic registry, any keyword that could help. She didn't even know his last name. But her fingers moved like they were guided by instinct more than logic. She searched for Liam, Field Medic, Fallujah, Unit Bravo 2. Michael's last deployment. And there it was. Liam Barrett. Honorably discharged. Decorated for service. Injured in action. Amanda stared at the screen, then at the memory of the man who'd said her husband's final words. The quiet in his eyes. The precise rhythm of his presence. He hadn't just known Michael. He'd been there. She didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because her mind wouldn't stop unfolding layer after layer of what this meant. The next morning, she returned to the cemetery. Not because she expected him to be there, but because she knew, now, he wouldn't break a promise. He was there. Waiting on the bench. Same posture. Same stillness. But this time, when he saw her, his eyes flickered with something he couldn't hide. Recognition. You figured it out, he said. Amanda didn't sit. Why didn't you tell me your name? You never asked. I'm asking now. Liam Barrett. She nodded slowly. You served with Michael. You held his hand when he died. Liam's expression didn't change, but a tremor crossed his fingers. Yes. And you waited all this time to find me? To deliver his words? No, he said. I didn't wait. I wasn't ready. There's a difference. Amanda finally sat. The wind picked up around them, stirring the leaves. Why now? Because grief isn't linear, Liam replied. I thought I could ignore it. Then I thought I could outrun it. But then I started hearing his voice when I tried to sleep. Not as a ghost. As a memory that wouldn't let go until I gave it to where it belonged. Amanda looked at him. Really looked. You lost someone too, didn't you? Liam swallowed. My brother. Same war. Different field. I couldn't save him. And I couldn't save Michael either. But maybe I could save the part of them that wanted to say goodbye. She closed her eyes. I didn't come back to say goodbye, Liam said quietly. I came back to give you the chance to say what you never got to. Amanda turned toward him. her voice barely a whisper. I hated him for leaving. Liam didn't flinch. I hated myself more, she continued. For not saying I loved him in that last call. I said, be careful. That was the last thing he heard from me. Not, I love you. Not, come home. Just, be careful. Liam reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object. Wrapped in cloth. He placed it in her hand without speaking. Amanda slowly unwrapped it. It was Michael's wedding band. She gasped. I took it off before they took him, Liam explained. He told me to. Said you'd need it more than the dirt did. Amanda clutched the ring to her chest, tears slipping freely down her face now. I'm sorry, Liam whispered. No, she said, shaking her head. Don't be. You're the only one who didn't leave. Liam looked away. I almost did. But you didn't. You sat. You listened. You gave me pieces of a man I thought was lost forever. He hesitated, then said, he loved you more than anything. He wanted you to find peace. Amanda stared at the ring, then at Liam. And for a moment, time blurred. He wasn't Michael. He never would be. But he was the echo of Michael's last breath. The witness to his final heartbeat. And in that space, he was enough. Liam didn't return the next day. Amanda stood beneath the same tree, the one that leaned just slightly to the left, watching the wind shuffle through dead leaves, hoping the silence wouldn't be all that remained. But there was no shadow waiting on the bench. No stillness in the air. Only the weight of everything he'd left in her hands. She clutched the ring tighter inside her pocket. That night, the dreams came. Vivid, fractured. Her mind weaving memories with moments Liam had described, Michael's laugh in a field hospital, the way he winced when lifting his right arm, the code phrase, 3 circles, he'd used to calm another soldier's panic. She saw Michael again, but this time not in the still frame of photographs. He was alive. Breathing. Speaking. And then he was gone. In the dream, it wasn't the war that took him. It was time. When she woke, Amanda was already moving. She didn't brush her hair. She didn't eat. She just drove. It was instinct more than plan, pulling her toward the one place she hadn't visited since before Michael deployed, the lake house. They used to escape there, just the two of them. No phones. No noise. No duty. It was the only place he ever let himself cry. She hadn't been able to return after his death. But something about Liam's voice, the way it cracked when he said, he wanted you to find peace, had triggered a feeling she couldn't ignore. She arrived near dusk. The cabin was still there, neglected, but standing. The windows coated in dust, the porch sagging under the weight of seasons past. She didn't unlock the door. The key was still under the rock by the second step. Some things, it seemed, time didn't touch. Inside, it smelled of cedar and ghosts. Amanda sat on the floor where their mattress had once been, her back against the wall, and opened the folded letter again. Not Michael's words. Liam's. He'd written it the same night they last spoke. In shaky cursive. If you're reading this, it means I found her. It means I finally stopped running. Amanda's throat closed. He didn't die screaming. He died remembering you. He said your name like it was his final prayer. And I stayed, not because I had to, but because I couldn't let him go alone. She pressed the paper to her chest. The room seemed to pulse around her, like the walls knew what she'd carried for years, and were finally letting her set it down. She didn't realize she'd fallen asleep until she heard the knock. A single, soft knock on the wood frame. Liam. He didn't enter. Just stood in the doorway, his silhouette backlit by the silver of an early moon. I wasn't sure I'd find you here, he said. Amanda blinked back exhaustion. You were right. Liam stepped inside, careful, reverent. She didn't ask how he knew. Maybe grief has its own GPS. Maybe some people are just meant to cross the same paths, over and over, until something gives. He sat beside her on the bare floor, hands on his knees. I didn't come to make anything harder, he said softly. I just couldn't leave it like that. Amanda turned to him. You didn't make anything harder. You gave it shape. For a long while, they sat in silence. And then Liam reached into his coat again. I didn't show you this before, he said, pulling out a small recorder. I wasn't sure you'd want it. Amanda stared at the device. Her breath caught. It's the last 5 minutes, he said. He asked me to record it. Said. She'll need to hear my voice, not just your version of it. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. You listened to it? Liam nodded. Once. That was enough. She pressed play. And there it was. Michael's voice, cracked and soft, like it was floating down a well. Amanda, hey, love, if this is what you're hearing, I guess I didn't make it. But I'm okay. I promise. I'm thinking of you. I'm thinking about the time we danced in the living room with the music too loud. About the food truck with the bad tacos and your bad jokes. She smiled through the tears. I wish I could see you one more time. Hold your hand. Tell you that every second I had with you mattered more than anything I ever did in uniform. The audio fizzled briefly, a static breath. You told me to be careful. And I was. I was careful with everything, except time. I thought I had more. I thought we had more. Amanda covered her mouth. The weight of his voice was unbearable. Sacred. So I'm leaving you something better than medals or explanations. I'm leaving you peace. I'm giving you Liam. He's seen me at my worst. But he saw this coming. He stayed. He held me when the pain came. He didn't run. And neither should you. The recording ended. Amanda sobbed, raw and uncontrollable. Liam didn't move. He just stayed beside her, like a sentry holding vigil for something holy. I should have been there, she whispered. I should have known. You couldn't, Liam said. And even if you had, it wouldn't have changed the ending. Just the goodbye. She turned toward him. The tears on her cheeks shone in the moonlight. Why did you wait so long to bring this to me? Because I didn't want to be the person who reopened the wound, he admitted. I wanted to be sure I wasn't coming from guilt. Or pity. I needed to know I was ready to give it. Not just drop it on your doorstep. Amanda stared at him for a long time. And now? I'm not sure what this is, he said. But I know you deserve the truth. And I know Michael wanted you to live again. She looked down at the recorder, now still and silent in her lap. I don't know if I can. You don't have to decide tonight, Liam said. But if you ever need someone who remembers him the way you do, you know where I'll be. Amanda closed her eyes. When she opened them, she wasn't alone in her grief anymore. 3 days had passed since that night at the lake house. Amanda hadn't spoken to Liam since. Not because she didn't want to, but because the words she carried inside were too fragile to let out just yet. She kept reliving Michael's voice on the recorder, each syllable folding over her like waves that refused to recede. And yet, she hadn't deleted it. Hadn't put it away. She kept it on the nightstand, as if he were still speaking. On the 4th morning, the knock came again. Not at a cabin. Not in the shadows. But at her front door. She opened it slowly. Liam stood there, hair wet with rain, holding something in both hands. He didn't speak at first. Just held out what looked like a carefully wrapped bundle. Mail, he said. I found it at the old house. It was tucked behind a loose board under the porch. Might have been there for years. Amanda took it with hesitation. It wasn't addressed. Just tied with twine. Inside was a weathered box, and beneath that, a letter in Michael's handwriting. This one wasn't written during the war. It was dated a month before he left. She sat on the living room couch, the rain tapping gently against the windows. Liam waited silently on the porch, not stepping in this time, giving her space. The letter read, "If you're reading this, it means I either chickened out or ran out of time. Probably both. Amanda, love. I've been hiding something. Not a betrayal. Not a secret. Just a truth I haven't had the courage to say out loud." Amanda blinked, her fingers tightening. "I never expected to be loved by someone like you. You made me feel like I wasn't just a soldier, or a broken man in uniform, but someone worthy of stillness. Of laughter. Of Sunday mornings. And that terrified me. So I bought this." Amanda opened the box. Inside was a small silver locket. Delicate. Simple. Inside it, a black and white photo of the two of them at the lake, Michael's hand brushing her hair aside, both of them laughing like the world had paused just for them. The letter continued. "I was going to give this to you the night before I left. But you were asleep on the couch, curled around that ridiculous pillow you always hug when you're cold. And I just watched you instead. Because I knew I might never get to again. So I left it here. Because part of me hoped, if I didn't make it back, you'd still find it. And maybe, just maybe, it would remind you that you made a man like me believe in forever." Amanda pressed the locket to her heart. Not sobbing this time. Just, still. Liam was still outside when she opened the door again. She stepped onto the porch, standing beside him without speaking. The clouds had begun to split, a soft golden crack appearing in the sky. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "For pushing you away. For needing time." "You don't owe me anything," Liam replied, not looking at her. "He was your husband. I was just the last page in his story." "No," she said quietly. "You were the bridge between who he was and what he left behind." They stood like that for a long while, neither quite sure what to do with the silence that hung between them now, not heavy, not hollow. Just, delicate. "I'm leaving town," Liam said after a while. "Thought I'd stay through the storm, but I think I've done what I came to do." Amanda turned toward him, startled. "Where will you go?" He shrugged. "Anywhere the ghosts don't follow me so loudly." She nodded, though the thought of him disappearing felt strange now, too sudden, too incomplete. "Would you," she began, then faltered. "Would you want to see Ethan before you go?" Liam looked up, caught off guard. You'd let me?" "He deserves to know who stayed," she said. "Not just who left." That afternoon, Liam sat across from a 5-year-old boy with a mop of sandy hair and questions too big for his small mouth. Ethan studied him carefully, suspicious of this stranger who suddenly wasn't so strange. "Did you know my dad?" the boy finally asked. Liam nodded. "Yeah. He saved my life more times than I deserved." "Was he brave?" "The bravest man I've ever known." Ethan tilted his head. "Did he talk about me?" Liam's eyes softened. "He did. Not with words. But with the way he closed his eyes when he held the picture of you and your mom. He was already thinking of you before you even existed." Ethan smiled a little. Not fully. But it was a beginning. Amanda watched from the doorway, arms crossed, heart beating like it was learning a new rhythm. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to sleep, she walked Liam to the door. "Thank you," she said. "For bringing me the words I didn't know I needed. For bringing him back, even for a little while." He hesitated, then said softly, "You brought him back more than I ever could. You made him real." She reached for his hand, not to pull him close, but to say goodbye in the way words sometimes fail to do. "I don't know what this is between us," she whispered. "But I know it's not nothing." "I know," Liam replied. "And I'm not asking for anything. I just didn't want to leave without saying that if someday you're ready for more than memory." She cut him off with a small nod. "Then maybe you won't be a stranger." He smiled for the first time since he arrived. And then he walked into the night. But this time, Amanda didn't feel abandoned. She felt seen. He'd come as a messenger. But somewhere between the words and the tears, he'd become something else entirely. A second chance. A chapter still unwritten. And maybe, just maybe, Michael had known that too. 3 months had passed. Spring had returned with a gentler rhythm, quiet blossoms unfurling along the path Amanda now walked every morning. The air was different now. Softer. As if the world had exhaled after holding its breath too long. She still carried the locket. Some mornings, she'd find herself opening it without even realizing, her fingers tracing the photo inside like it was a page in a book she wasn't ready to finish. And yet, each time she looked at it now, it no longer hurt the same. The ache hadn't vanished. But it had changed, grown quieter, like a tide retreating into something deeper. Ethan had begun asking fewer questions about his father. Not because he had forgotten, but because he had started accepting the answers he already carried in his heart. What remained were memories, and a voice. Michael's voice. And Liam's, too. They had become different echoes of the same truth, that love does not vanish with the body. It lingers. Through stories. Through kindness. Through the simple act of someone remembering. And Amanda remembered everything. On the first warm Sunday of April, Amanda stood under the great oak at the far end of the town's old park, Ethan's favorite place. He was chasing butterflies with a stick in one hand and a ridiculous cowboy hat someone had given him. She smiled to herself. Then she saw him. Liam. He wasn't in uniform this time. No duffel bag. No weight in his shoulders. Just jeans, a flannel shirt, and that same uneven smile she remembered too well. He stopped a few feet away, uncertain. She didn't move. Didn't say anything. Just looked at him. It was Ethan who noticed first. He dropped his stick and ran to Liam without hesitation. No pause. No questions. Just, "You came back." Liam knelt, catching the boy mid-run. "I told you I might." "Did you bring the storybook?" Ethan asked. Liam glanced up at Amanda, unsure if the invitation still stood. Amanda nodded. "It's in the bag, right?" she said. He smiled. "Always is." They sat beneath the oak. The three of them. The book was old, dog-eared and stained at the corners, but it was the one Michael had written letters on the back pages of. The one Amanda had read to Ethan from when he was still learning how to speak. The one that had become their anchor in the hardest nights. Liam opened it gently, cleared his throat, and began to read. His voice was deeper than Michael's. Rougher in the consonants. But steady. Calm. Amanda didn't hear the story. Not really. She heard the peace in Ethan's breathing as he leaned against Liam's arm. She heard the way Liam's voice trembled slightly when the main character spoke of loss and hope and finding light again in unexpected places. And most of all, she heard something she hadn't let herself hope for in a long time. A beginning. When the story ended, Liam closed the book slowly. Ethan had already dozed off on the picnic blanket, one hand still resting on the corner of the page. Amanda spoke first. "You didn't say goodbye." "I didn't want to," Liam said quietly. She studied him for a long moment. "And now? Now I'm hoping this is a hello." She didn't smile. "Not yet." But her eyes softened. "I'm not ready," she said. "To let go. To forget. To start over." "You don't have to," he replied. I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here to sit beside what's already been loved. If that's enough. Amanda looked down at Ethan, then back at the man beside her. Michael would have liked you, she whispered. Liam exhaled through his nose. He already saved me. Whether he knew it or not. Amanda picked up the locket, now hanging loosely from her wrist. She opened it, turning it toward Liam. You want to know something strange, she said. He had a habit of collecting rocks. The smooth kind. Said each one had a story. He'd never leave a place without finding one. I remember, Liam said. He gave me one before we parted ways. Told me, this one's not for memory. It's for direction. I didn't get it back then. Amanda smiled softly. That sounds like him. She reached into her coat pocket and took out a small gray stone, worn smooth like it had lived 100 lives in a single stream. I found this by the porch the day you brought the letter, she said. It wasn't there before. Liam looked at it, stunned. That's the one he gave me. I must have dropped it. Amanda placed it beside the sleeping boy's hand. Then maybe he was always meant to find it, she said. Liam nodded. The silence between them now was rich, full of meaning. No longer a wall, but a bridge. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the park, Amanda leaned back against the tree and closed her eyes. Liam did the same. For the first time in a long time, neither of them was running. Not from grief. Not from love. And certainly not from each other. Time would do what time does. Heal. Erode. Soften. But for now, there was this. A boy who believed in butterflies. A man who remembered final words like they were sacred. And a woman who finally understood that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means making space. For what was. And for what still might be. And as the wind rustled through the leaves above, it carried no sadness. Only the quiet promise. You are not alone anymore.